There's a timeline that appears in the final stages of every dying empire. It's not gradual, it's not peaceful, and it follows the exact same sequence every single time. Spain took 80 years from peak to collapse. Britain took 40 years. The Soviet Union took 900 days. And right now, the United States is in month 18 of a pattern that has never, not once in recorded history, reversed itself. This is the story of Stage 5, the point of no return, and why 18 months is all we have left before Stage 6 begins. And Stage 6 has never been stopped. Let me show you the timeline, the exact sequence, the specific markers, and why every empire that reached Stage 5 told itself the same lie. We're different. We'll be fine. We have time. They were wrong. We're wrong. And the clock is already running. Before we go into the timeline, you need to understand what Stage 5 actually is. It's not the beginning of decline. That was Stage 1, military overextension. It's not currency problems. That was Stage 2, debasement. It's not the debt crisis. That was Stage 3. It's not even the loss of productive capacity. That was Stage 4. Stage 5 is social fracture. The moment when the population stops believing in the system, when trust collapses, when institutions lose legitimacy, when the social contract breaks. This is the inflection point. Before Stage 5, decline can theoretically be reversed. After Stage 5 begins, it cannot. Because once the population loses faith, once they stop cooperating, the empire cannot function. It doesn't matter how much money you print. It doesn't matter how many troops you deploy. If the people don't believe, the empire is already dead. It just hasn't fallen yet. Let's start with Spain. 1590 to 1650. Stage 5 began around 1620. By this point, Spain had been declining for 20 years. The silver mines were depleting. Military defeats were mounting. The currency was debased beyond recognition. But the empire still existed. The king still ruled. The bureaucracy still functioned. Then came the social fracture. The Spanish nobility stopped paying taxes. They claimed exemptions. They hid wealth. The crown couldn't collect revenue. The peasantry revolted. The Catalan Revolt of 1640. The Portuguese Revolt of 1640. These weren't invasions. These were internal uprisings. The empire was fragmenting from within. And here's the critical timeline. From the start of Stage 5 in 1620 to the loss of Portugal in 1640 was 20 years. From 1640 to the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, which ended Spanish dominance in Europe, was 8 years. 28 years total from Stage 5 to irrelevance. Spain tried to hold it together. They borrowed more. They raised taxes on whoever would still pay. They fought wars they couldn't win. None of it mattered. The social contract was broken. The empire fractured. And by 1650, Spain was finished as a great power. Now Britain, 1920 to 1960. Britain entered Stage 5 after World War I. They'd won the war, but the cost was catastrophic. An entire generation dead. The economy shattered. The currency weakened. But the empire still spanned the globe. Stage 5 began with the strikes, the general strike of 1926. 9 days when the entire country shut down. Coal miners, transport workers, printers, millions of workers walked off the job. The government won. The strike ended. But the social contract was cracked. Then came the Great Depression. Unemployment hit 25%. Hunger marches filled London. The government cut spending, cut benefits, cut everything. Trust eroded further. By 1931, Britain abandoned the gold standard. The pound collapsed. The global reserve currency admitted it couldn't keep its promises. This was the marker. The point where the world stopped believing in British permanence. World War II accelerated everything. Britain won again, but at what cost? Another generation dead. Another economic catastrophe. Another round of massive borrowing from America. By 1945, Britain owed more than its entire GDP. The empire couldn't be defended, couldn't be funded, couldn't be maintained. India gained independence in 1947, 2 years after the war ended, the crown jewel gone. From 1947 to 1970, Britain lost everything. Africa, Middle East, Southeast Asia, Caribbean. 23 years from the start of decolonization to the end of empire. The timeline from Stage 5 in 1920 to irrelevance by 1960 was 40 years. 40 years from the general strike to becoming America's junior partner. And Britain tried everything. They formed the Commonwealth to maintain influence. They developed nuclear weapons to stay relevant. They created the welfare state to maintain social cohesion. None of it stopped the decline. Stage 5 had begun. The timeline was locked in. Now, the Soviet Union, 1985 to 1991. This is the most instructive because it happened so fast. Stage 5 began with Gorbachev, 1985, Glasnost and Perestroika. Openness and restructuring. Gorbachev thought he could reform the system, make it more efficient, more transparent, more sustainable. He was wrong. Because once you start questioning the system, once you allow criticism, once you admit problems exist, you cannot control where it goes. The Soviet population had been told for 70 years that communism was superior, that the West was failing, that Soviet power was permanent. Glasnost shattered the lie. People learned the truth. The economy was broken. The military was corrupt. The government had been lying for decades. Trust collapsed overnight. By 1989, the entire Eastern Bloc was in revolt. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, East Germany. The Berlin Wall fell in November 1989. The Soviet Union did nothing. They couldn't. They were broke. The oil revenue that had sustained them was gone. The military couldn't be paid. The KGB couldn't suppress uprisings in 15 republics simultaneously. In 1990, the Baltic states declared independence. In 1991, the Soviet Union ceased to exist. The timeline: 4 years from Gorbachev's reforms to the Berlin Wall, 6 years from reforms to complete dissolution, the fastest collapse of a superpower in modern history. And it happened because Stage 5, social fracture, happened in a system that was already hollowed out economically. The moment the population stopped believing, stopped cooperating, stopped obeying, the empire imploded. Now let's talk about the United States, 2023 to present. Stage 5 began in the summer of 2023. You might not have noticed, most people didn't. But the markers are clear if you know what to look for. Marker 1, institutional trust collapse. Trust in government is at an all-time low, 17% according to Pew Research. Trust in media, 11%. Trust in corporations, single digits. Trust in each other, the lowest ever recorded. This isn't partisan. Both sides distrust the same institutions. They just disagree on why. Marker 2, non-compliance. Tax evasion is increasing. Not reporting income, not filing, not paying. The IRS is overwhelmed. They can't audit everyone. People are opting out. Labor force participation is down. Millions of working-age adults simply aren't working. They're not counted as unemployed. They've left the system entirely. Marker 3, internal fragmentation. Red states versus blue states. Urban versus rural. Generational warfare. The country is splitting along every fault line simultaneously, and it's accelerating. States are ignoring federal law, sanctuary cities, constitutional carry, legal marijuana, abortion bans. Every state is doing whatever it wants. The federal government threatens, negotiates, compromises, but it cannot enforce. That's Stage 5. When the central authority loses the ability to compel obedience. Marker 4, elite defection. The wealthy are leaving, citizenship renunciations are at record highs, billionaires are buying foreign passports, setting up residences in Singapore, Dubai, Monaco. They're hedging, they see what's coming, and they're positioning for it. This is what happened in Spain. The nobility stopped paying taxes and left. This is what happened in Britain. The best minds emigrated. This is what happened in the USSR. The party elite moved money offshore before collapse. So here's the timeline for America. Stage 5 began 18 months ago. Summer of 2023, we're now in month 18. If we follow the Spain timeline, we have 26 more years. If we follow the Britain timeline, we have 38 more years. If we follow the Soviet timeline, we have 4 more years. But here's what people miss. The timeline accelerates. Spain took 80 years total to collapse. Stage 5 was 28 years. Britain took 40 years total. Stage 5 was 40 years. The Soviet Union took 6 years total. Stage 5 was 6 years. Each empire collapsed faster than the previous one. Why? Because information moves faster, capital moves faster, social fracture happens faster. In Spain, it took years for revolts to spread. In Britain, it took months. In the USSR, it took weeks. In America, with instant communication, global financial markets, and social media, it will take days. So the Soviet timeline is our model. 6 years from Stage 5 to collapse. We're in month 18. That leaves 4.5 years, 54 months. But there are accelerants we need to account for. The Soviet Union didn't have 40 trillion in debt. They didn't have 800 billion in annual military commitments. They didn't have a reserve currency that could collapse globally. They didn't have a financial system where derivatives exposure is 1 quadrillion. When the US enters stage 6, loss of reserve currency status, the feedback loops will be faster and more violent than anything the USSR experienced. So here's my projection. 18 months until stage 6 begins. That's when foreign central banks start dumping treasuries, when oil trades in yuan, when the dollar loses its privileged position. Another 12 months for stage 6 to complete. That's when inflation explodes, when interest rates spike, when the government can't borrow. Another 6 months for stage 7, total collapse. 36 months, 3 years from now. And before you dismiss this as doomerism, consider what's already happening. The BRICS nations are developing a common currency. China and Saudi Arabia signed an oil deal in yuan. Russia and India are trading in rubles and rupees. Central banks are buying gold at record pace. The Fed is trapped between inflation and recession. The government is running $2 trillion deficits during economic expansion. Social cohesion is disintegrating. We're not approaching stage 6. We're 18 months into stage 5 with every indicator accelerating towards 6. The timeline is locked, the pattern is clear, and history says we have 36 months. Here's what the next 18 months looks like. The final phase of stage 5 before 6 begins. Expect more institutional failures. Banks, corporations, government agencies. More social unrest. Protests, riots, political violence, more elite defection, wealthy individuals and corporations moving assets offshore, more state-level fragmentation, states ignoring federal authority on more issues, more loss of international credibility, allies hedging their commitments, and more desperate measures from the federal government, more money printing, more debt, more attempts to maintain control as authority erodes. This is the pattern. This is the timeline. This is stage 5, and it has never reversed. Not in Spain, not in Britain, not in the USSR. Not once. Ever. So what do you do with this information? 3 options. 1. Dismiss it. Believe America is exceptional. Believe the pattern doesn't apply. Believe we have time. That's what every empire believed. 2. Prepare, understand the timeline, position accordingly, move assets, build resilience. Accept that the next 3 years will not look like the last 3 years. 3. Understand that even if you're prepared individually, systemically this cannot be stopped. The debt cannot be repaid. The currency cannot be saved. The empire cannot be maintained. The timeline is locked. Stage 5 has begun. Stage 6 is 18 months away. Stage 7 follows within 3 years. The pattern has never been broken. 3 empires, 3 collapses, 3 times the same sequence. And now it's our turn. The clock started 18 months ago. We have 18 months left. And then stage 6 begins. And no empire has ever survived stage 6.